morning, everybody. Welcome to One Church, and my name is Ryan. I'm the lead pastor here for a couple more weeks, and our teaching pastor, because I know there are some new folks here today, our teaching pastor, Aaron Stritzel, is going to be my successor at One Church. He's going to become the lead pastor of One Church. I'm stumbling over my words because, to be honest, it's kind of emotional for me today, and so I'm going to talk about One Church here later on in the sermon. About 75% of the sermon is going to be about the topic we're looking at today, and the last 25% or so, we're going to talk about One Church and why we started One Church and why it's important. And I believe many more communities like this need to be started around the country. So, being my last full sermon here at One Church, I thought, what topic will we talk about? And we're talking about the topic of abortion today. What kind of buffoon would schedule that topic on the last Sunday that he's speaking? What kind of a glutton for punishment does a pastor have to be to talk about, such a deeply emotional topic that we're going to talk about today as a part of this Issues 2016 series? We're looking at issues that divide Americans. We're looking at issues that obviously are front and center in every campaign, at least recently, and issues that are a challenge for us as a people to talk about without polarization, rancor, mean-spirited comments, name-calling. Do you know what I'm talking about? These are issues that seem to challenge our humanity even. Are you with me? As we try to discuss these and navigate our way through these issues and the different sides and who are we going to be as a country, these are issues that challenge us greatly. And a couple of weeks ago, I showed a photo that somebody posted on my Facebook feed, a friend of mine, and I just love this photo. You will never regret being kind. And as I thought about this series over the past few weeks as we're getting ready for it, for me personally, there couldn't be no better theme than kindness. It seems to be that kindness is perhaps our greatest need right now. And that we'll never regret being kind no matter how strongly we feel about a particular issue. We could say we value this and talk passionately about we value this, and then as soon as we meet somebody who disagrees with us, all of our compassion and values go out the window. And we demonize that person in the name of our belief, right? And we treat other people as enemies if they disagree with us, right after we just got done talking about some high, lofty values and goals. It's so hypocritical, but we all are tempted to do that. And so perhaps our greatest need is kindness, and maybe especially today, as we talk about what has been probably the most divisive issue in American politics in the last 50 years, the issue of abortion. And so some people would ask, why would you even talk about that in church? First of all, there's no win. Public opinion is split close to 50-50, so you're guaranteed to make half the people angry. Right? Why would you talk about this? And I'll just be upfront about it. Contrary to what I normally do, I'm not really going to share my own personal view today. Now, trust me, there's no shortage of opinions when it comes to Ryan Gear. All right, so you can always get an opinion from me, but not today. And the reason is, it's an issue where there is such difference in public opinion. It's almost 50-50. Not quite, but almost 50-50. And I also have 2 more weeks to be the lead pastor here. So I don't want to say, here's my view, deal with it, Aaron. Congratulations, buddy. And so my goal today is to fairly present 2 sides of this issue, so that if you're pro-choice or you're pro-life, you would feel like I've been fairly, accurately represented here. And so here's what that does. Instead of just making half the people angry, that makes everybody angry. Because now when you don't take a side, well, then everybody feels like they haven't been defended fully. But I hope, my goal is to model what a civil, fair discussion could look like, and then respect your ability to hold your opinion and vote the way you want to vote, think the way you want to think about this particular issue. How does that sound? And hopefully, we as a church community can be a group of people who can model civility and kindness. Now, I want to acknowledge a few things up front that need to be said. First of all, I'm a man talking about abortion. Wouldn't it have been better for a female pastor to talk about abortion? Probably, yeah. And so I acknowledge that today. I'm probably underqualified to give this sermon. Number two, abortion is obviously an incredibly emotional topic. At some point today, without me trying, I'm going to say something that will provoke an emotional reaction in you. How could it not? Right? Of course that's going to happen today. And so I'm not intending to do that, but if you feel that emotional reaction, just want to acknowledge that makes you human and normal, and that's fine. So how could we not have emotional reactions to certain things? I may say something representing the other side, and you might think, but, and that's fine. I'll try to be fair to both, but of course there will be emotion. Third, in every congregation in the United States, there are wonderful, dedicated, godly, good women who at some point in their lives had an abortion. And when a pastor says he's going to talk about abortion in this country, you just don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. And I just want to acknowledge that we want this to be an emotionally safe place today. I know what trigger warnings are. I'm going to do my best to avoid things like that, my best. I just want to acknowledge that this isn't just some abstract issue, but this is real life with real people, and that's probably the most important thing I'll say today. Everybody agree to that? All right. A couple more things. One more thing, really. Actually, I covered it, that I'm going to spend most of the sermon talking about abortion, but then the last part we'll talk about one church. So here's some statistics. So we're going to throw a lot of information at us today. And some general statistics, and then we'll move into the pro-choice view and then the pro-life view. So, abortion is declining in the United States. How many of you were aware of that? Would you be willing to raise you knew that the number of abortion is actually greatly declining in the United States? That is true. It's the lowest it's been since 1973, when Roe v. Wade when abortion was legalized in the Roe v. Wade decision. Now, everybody's claiming credit for that, too, by the way. Pro-choice sides and the pro-life side, everybody's claiming credit, because that's a goal that everybody shares, to reduce the number of abortions in the United States. And so abortions are declining. Roughly half the number of abortions were performed last year as 1990. It's incredible. So if you would like to see the number of abortions reduced in the United States, this is certainly a move in the right direction. Now, why is that happening? There are a few different opinions, of course. One opinion is Gail. I'm sorry. In my nervousness, I'm a little befuddled. I'm sorry. I need to get it together, don't I? You guys better get it together when you're talking about this topic. Mara Gondal Powers, a lawyer at the National Women's Law Center, said, "We know that's because teens are, one, using contraception more, and two, using multiple methods of contraception at the same time." Some pro-life advocates argue that fewer women want an abortion. One said there's an entire generation of women who saw a sonogram as their first baby picture, believing that that's changed in attitude towards a fetus or an unborn child. Even though millennials feel more open to things like premarital sex, same-sex marriage, other values that were more controversial in the past, millennials still feel conflicted about abortion. The percentages of pro-choice and pro-life millennials is actually about the same as older Americans. So abortion seems to be an issue that divides Americans. It always has. It's possible that it always will. It's not changing in societal views the way so many other issues have. The Gallup poll in May 2015 found that Americans are divided. 50% of Americans say they're pro-choice, 44% say they're pro-life. 54% of women describe themselves as pro-choice, 46% of men describe themselves as pro-choice. Little history on Roe v. Wade. So in 1973, the Supreme Court ruled that abortion would be legal in the United States. That case was called Roe v. Wade. And legal up to the age of fetal viability, which I believe was 28 weeks at that point, and it was revised to 23 to 24 weeks later. At that time in 1973, only 4 states had legalized abortion. So many people, just politically speaking, viewed this as overreach. And so there's been blowback since that time because only 4 states had legalized abortion at that time. Now, about half the states in the country, if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, would have legal abortion. About half the states in the country would make abortion illegal. In Arizona, just to talk specifically about Arizona law, a woman must receive state-directed counseling that includes information designed to discourage her from having an abortion, and then wait 24 hours before the procedure is provided. Counseling must be provided in person and must take place before the waiting period begins, thereby necessitating 2 separate trips to the facility. Health plans offered in the state's health exchange under the Affordable Care Act only cover abortion when a woman's life is in danger or her health is severely compromised. The parent of a minor must consent before abortion is provided, and a woman must undergo an ultrasound before obtaining an abortion. The provider must offer her the option to view the image. The ultrasound must be provided at least 24 hours before the abortion. So that's specific to Arizona law right now. All right, so now moving into the pro-choice view, and then we'll follow that with the pro-life view. And again, our goal is to be as fair as possible to both, so that somebody who is pro-choice would say, I think he's been fair to me. And somebody who is pro-life would say, I think he's been fair to me. So the pro-choice view, and I'll use the common terminology of pro-life and pro-choice because that's how they refer to themselves. If you ask a person who's pro-choice, why are you pro-choice? Why do you believe that an abortion should be legal all or at least some of the time? Here's what a person who is pro-choice might say. First of all, they might cite the subject of women's rights. Throughout world history, up until relatively modern times, even in the United States, a woman's life, a woman's plight, has largely been defined by her ability to give birth to children. So prior to effective contraception, any married woman could expect to have 10 or more children in her lifetime. And that doesn't leave much time for anything else. And so that was a woman's, that was her choice throughout much of world history, was to bear children and raise those children. Obviously, that prohibited her from engaging in what modern women would consider a professional life outside of the home. And in addition to that, it prohibited her from being able to be economically self-sufficient. So she was dependent on a man in order to raise these children and in order to provide for her own needs. And so those who are pro-choice might view abortion as the last control that a woman could have over her reproductive power that would give her options in life besides having a large number of children. Margaret Sanger, a pro-choice advocate, said, "No woman can call herself free who does not control her own body." So a pro-choice person would likely see abortion, number one, through the lens of women's rights. Secondly, women's health. Abortion did not begin when Roe v. Wade was legalized. Abortion has always been practiced throughout the history of humanity. There are images on the internet of advertisements from the late 1800s about how women could get a certain type of massage or could consume a certain type of drink, and that was code for being able to obtain an abortion. So before abortion was legal in the United States, of course, there were women who sought to have an abortion in the United States, and they were performed by untrained people who proposed a greater health risk than abortion today. There's still a risk to having an abortion today, but the risk was greater when an untrained person could be a quack, a snake oil salesman performing an abortion, or as it's been called, the back alley abortion. So women were harmed by untrained people trying to perform an abortion. Most pro-choice people I know desire that abortion be safe, legal, and rare. They would like to see the number of abortions greatly reduced, but they believe that abortion should be legal to reduce harm to women as an issue of women's health. A third reason a pro-choice person might cite for being pro-choice is financial reasons. Folks who are pro-choice might argue that if the United States had a more robust financial safety net for new mothers, the temptation to get an abortion might be reduced. The Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-choice organization, reported that 75% of abortions performed in 2014 were for low-income patients. As I said a couple of weeks ago, some statements bear repeating. If this is true, 75% of abortions performed in 2014 in the United States were for low-income patients. So regardless of your view, if you would like to see the number of abortions reduced in the United States, it certainly stands to reason that providing a better life for new mothers would take great strides towards reducing the number of abortions in the United States. The U.S. Department of Labor found that only 12% of U.S. private sector workers have access to paid family leave through their employer. 12%. Nearly 25% of women go back to work within 2 weeks of having a baby. A woman's body is not recovered from giving birth in 2 weeks. The United States is the only industrialized nation in the world that does not guarantee paid family leave. And so a pro-choice person might point out that those who oppose abortion might also oppose paid family leave. It's just kind of how our politics break. It's not always true, but often that's how our political lines break in the United States. Michael J. Tucker said if the anti-abortion movement took a tenth of the energy they put into noisy theatrics and devoted it to improving the lives of children who have been born into poverty, violence, and neglect, they would make the world shine. A pro-choice person might observe that many pro-life persons show great concern for a baby until it's born. And then after birth, the baby and mother might feel like they're on their own. We're trying to be fair to the pro-choice argument. A couple more reasons. A pro-choice person might point out the shame that can be attached to an unplanned pregnancy and to the mother in the United States, and largely because of our religious environment. The Christian college I attended, and I graduated in 2001, I squeezed 6 years of college I squeezed 4 years, I just screwed that joke up, look at that. I need a drink of water. Get it together, Ryan. I was going to say I squeezed 4 years of college into 6. I was on the 6-year plan, but I graduated in 2001. Should have been 99, right? Doesn't seem long ago to me, but I guess it kind of is, right? But at that time, in the Christian college I attended, now listen, if a young woman, a student at that college, mysteriously developed a bigger belly, she would no longer be a student at that college. She just kind of disappeared from the campus. That was a policy, right? So, interestingly enough, it seems that religious environments who do largely oppose abortion would also perhaps make life harder for a woman who has an unplanned pregnancy, thereby increasing her temptation to get an abortion. You follow that? And a pro-choice person might, if we're talking about religion, might quote a Bible verse like Exodus 21, verses 22 through 25. I'm going to take that drink now. After the Israelites had come out of Egypt, they're being given the law. And here's a portion of the law from Exodus chapter 21. When people who are fighting injure a pregnant woman so that there's a miscarriage, and yet no further harm follows, the one responsible shall be fined what the woman's husband demands. Notice the rights are taken away from the woman. It's her husband. It's very patriarchal. Paying as much as the judges determine. So you're looking at a steep fine, depending on how angry the husband is. Verse 23, if any harm follows, and we assume that means to the mother, we're not told, but if any harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. And so it appears that if the unborn baby or fetus, depending on the terminology you use, is harmed, there's going to be a fine. If the mother's life is taken, lex talionis takes effect and the person is going to be executed. So it seems to argue that the mother's life is more valuable than the life of the unborn or the fetus. So a pro-choice person, if they were looking for Bible verses, might cite that verse. But there's a high correlation between religious views and views on abortion. Hannah and I talked this week and decided, we would share a little bit of our story. And when we talk about a religious environment and how that can affect religious, people, good Christian kids. So Hannah and I were raised in conservative Christian families who taught us to abstain from sex before marriage. Some probably teach their kids to abstain from sex after marriage too. Like that, I don't, but for us it was before marriage. So we started dating in our 20s, and we both shared those values, their beliefs, and had those voices in our heads about what the Christian expectation was, and eventually we fell short of that belief. And we felt guilty about that. And that guilt lasted until other feelings became more powerful than that guilt. And then we felt bad about that, right? And then we felt guilty for a while. And in the course, and we're good little Christian kids, so we weren't taught about contraception, really. And so there came this time where we thought that we might be pregnant. And now we were both very steeped in the conservative Christian world at that time. And so looking back on it, even looking over my sermon this morning, I was kind of feeling some of those same feelings. And it turned out we took a pregnancy test and Hannah wasn't pregnant. But before we knew, we talked about the crushing shame that we would have experienced, and it would have been real. It would have been life-altering, and honestly, it would have felt life-ending at that time for both of us. And Hannah said, she didn't seriously consider an abortion, but it crossed her mind, which I appreciated her honesty. And I don't think I'm quite certain we would have not have had an abortion, but we weren't faced with that choice completely. This is right. So we were talking about what we might do if we were pregnant, but we found out we weren't. And so we can empathize a little bit and feel the fear and, yes, the shame that religious young people often feel. And Hannah made the statement, any consideration I gave to it was prompted by our religious environment. It's very, very important. Just a couple more points. A pro-choice advocate would believe in sex education that promotes both abstinence and the use of contraceptives. And they say with greater contraceptive use, there would be less need for abortion. And then one final very practical point a pro-choice person might make. If Roe v. Wade were overturned, which is always in every presidential election, is a major platform in the political parties. If Roe v. Wade were overturned, what would happen? And we kind of covered it earlier. Now, about half the states in the United States would legalize abortion immediately. California, Washington, New York, Illinois, right? Some are just, there was more progressive states, they would immediately legalize abortion. About half the country would make abortion illegal. So women in the deep south and in the mountain west would not be able to obtain an abortion legally. Women on the coasts and some Midwestern states would. So a pro-choice person might say, even if Roe v. Wade were overturned, abortion is never going to be illegal in the United States. There's no reason to think that. It would be against all factual information to think that abortion will be illegal at some point in the United States. So that's one final practical point. So it's a quick, incomplete summary of why a person might be pro-choice, and I've done my best to be fair. And if you would describe yourself as pro-choice, I hope you feel that I've been fair to you. So now, the pro-life view. The primary reason those who are pro-life would give for their view would be that they believe life begins at conception, and performing an abortion is the taking of a human life. And so it's a simple concept to understand. And you can imagine why there can be such strong feeling and fervor behind that belief. We're talking about the rights and health of women versus a debate about when life begins. Of course, this is going to be hotly debated. And so a pro-life person might state that an unwanted, unborn human is called a fetus, while a wanted, unborn human is called a baby. And it seems arbitrary to a person who is pro-life. The local TV news aired a story last year about a botched abortion in Phoenix, and this is a heavy story, but it perfectly illustrates the pro-life position, and it happened right here in Phoenix. The mother was a 27-year-old woman, and the fetus was 21 weeks old, which is close to viability outside of the womb. The mother had received a medication meant to abort the pregnancy. It was not a partial birth abortion. It was a medication meant to induce an abortion. The nurse at the abortion clinic called 911 because, in her words, according to the call, we are a termination clinic. There was a termination that was performed, recorded on February 26th, this call. There is a fetus that is breathing right now. So we need someone to do services. The fetus is breathing, so we need to care for it now. The emergency dispatcher asked if the newborn had been subject to a partial birth abortion, and the child had not been harmed in that way. However, the child needed medical care at once. The nurse at the clinic said, we can't provide that care except for oxygen, and we're trying to keep the fetus stable until someone arrives. Pro-choice or pro-life, nobody wants to hear that story or even imagine such a horrific thing. So at 21 weeks, a fetus or an unborn baby is about 10 and a half inches long, will kick soon, is developing eyebrows and eyelids. And so a pro-life person might say, before exiting the birth canal, this was a fetus who could be illegally aborted. After traveling a few inches, this is now a baby whom the law demands should be saved as a human being. And so it illustrates the pro-life position and also the emotion behind this debate. Those who hold to a softer pro-life view might reference fetal viability. And so there's a spectrum here that they might want to see abortion illegal after a certain number of weeks or decrease that. A pro-life website published a study last May from the New England Journal of Medicine, found a surprising number of babies born at 22 weeks were able to live without outside assistance. Dr. Edward Bell of the University of Iowa said he believes 22 weeks should be the new standard of viability. Among legislators here in Arizona, there was an attempt to restrict abortion to 20 weeks a couple of years ago. Then Governor Jan Brewer signed HB 2036, the Mother's Health and Safety Act. It was in 2012, actually. However, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals granted an injunction blocking the law's enforcement. The Supreme Court refused to hear the state's appeal in 2014. So women in Arizona can access abortion to the point of viability as defined under Roe v. Wade now, around 24 weeks. Again, religious views. Many people who are pro-life cite their religious views as a reason or the reason for that. So 75% of white evangelicals believe abortion is morally wrong. 53% of white Catholics believe that abortion is morally wrong, while the doctrine of the Roman Catholic Church opposes abortion in all circumstances as well as contraception. 25% of religiously unaffiliated people say abortion is morally wrong. So you can see there's a clear correlation between religious view and your view on abortion. Most progressive Christian denominations oppose abortion used as a contraceptive. While they would support abortion in instances of rape, incest, when the mother's life is in danger, Most progressive Christian denominations would still oppose abortion used as a contraceptive. Not all, however. The United Church of Christ supports a pro-choice position, and some others as well. So those who are pro-life would quote a few Bible passages, and you've probably heard these. If you've been around the church for a while, the most often quoted is probably Psalm 139. It says, "For you," speaking to God, "for you created my inmost being, you knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth." Interesting. "Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be." And so, in all instances of Bible interpretation, whether the verse we quoted from Exodus in the pro-choice view or these, it raises questions, of course. I mean, is this literal? Is it poetic? There are some interesting statements that, aside from a fetus or an unborn baby, that, our lives predestined, this kind of thing. There are questions about the Exodus law in the pro-choice view that we read. There are women who have an abortion, and they don't regret that, and they don't have really psychological, emotional struggles with that. There are women who do. There are women who do. And so somebody who is pro-life might cite those experiences as a reason for their view. The pastor Adam Hamilton has been a mentor of mine. He's a pastor of a massive church in Kansas City called the Church of the Resurrection. Something like 20,000 members. It was a United Methodist Church, started in 1990, and the facility is just sprawling. It looks like an airport. People locally call it Six Flags Over Jesus. And he's just this incredibly influential pastor. He gave the sermon at President Obama's inauguration worship service in 2012. He's a very accomplished pastor. He's reached thousands of people locally and a lot more through his writing. In a book called Confronting the Controversies, Adam wrote a chapter on abortion, and he included an email written to him by a mother who chose not to have an abortion. And we're talking about the pro-life view, who chose not to have an abortion, and she wrote this email to him. She wrote that when she was 17 and her boyfriend was 16, her boyfriend invited her to a party. All the parents know what's coming next. As the night went on, couples paired off and went to bedrooms. She became pregnant. When her father found out, he was furious. Since this happened before Roe v. Wade, he set up an appointment with a doctor in Switzerland and was preparing to fly her to Switzerland to terminate the pregnancy, but she refused. He told her he would never welcome her back into his home if she had the baby. She moved in with her 16-year-old boyfriend's family, and they moved to Arizona, actually, to give birth to spare the family embarrassment back in Kansas. They struggled to make ends meet. They divorced after 12 years of marriage. She never went to college. She was now a single mother, and she wrote this email to Adam Hamilton, this famous pastor. "Yes, my life changed dramatically, but to this day, that child has been the greatest blessing to me and thousands of others. God prompts him to call his mom when she needs to talk, but doesn't want to bother him. I'm so proud of the husband and father that he's become. So many times when I look at him, I think that this person could have not existed. I knew the baby was a gift from God. I look back sometimes at the college that I missed. My life is different than it could have been, but I wouldn't change it for anything." And then she says, "Thank you, Adam, for being my gift from God. I never dreamed 36 years ago while I was carrying you that I would have the impact on God's people and me that you do. You are my pastor, my confidant, my best friend. I love you, Mom." And so Adam, of course, tells this story. Adam describes himself as pro-life with a heavy heart, realizing why there are people who hold the pro-choice position as well, but it's a powerful story he tells that supports a pro-choice position. If you've heard my story, I was conceived out of wedlock. My parents never married. I met my dad when I was 19 for the first time, met him a couple times. And so the founding pastor of one church was conceived out of wedlock. Many who are pro-life also oppose contraception, some for religious reasons that are well thought out. Whether you agree with them or not, there's a coherent argument there. And some just for cultural reasons. They just expect their their teenage kids to abstain, and so they don't talk about contraceptives. Of course, there's a debate about when pregnancy actually occurs and when life begins. So as a dad of two boys, the day will come sooner than I want it to, where we have the talk. And while I won't give my view on abortion, I will talk about contraception for a moment. I'll have a talk with my boys, and I'll tell them, we would love it if you could abstain. And because that's the safest form of sex is none. And of course, there are all your complications and unwanted pregnancy and disease that can be spread. And so we would love it if you would practice abstinence until you're married. If you don't, this is what contraception means. And I'll have a condom there, and I'll grab a banana or a hot dog or, some other phallic fruit object within reach, and I'll demonstrate how that works. Are you taking notes, boys? Right? And we don't have a daughter. If we did have a daughter, I would have a similar awkward conversation with her. And I'm speaking for me personally. It's just my opinion. You can have a different opinion. For me personally, I would say, well, and here's what an IUD is. And we could talk about that. And if she thinks that might be a good idea, I'm not going to force my kids to do anything, but I believe in having a conversation with them so that they would be informed about what abstinence is and about what contraception is, to raise informed kids, realizing they're going to make their own choices anyway. Right? And I'm just talking as a dad. So one more thing before we quickly talk about One Church. I want to say something to ladies who may have had an abortion, or ladies who had a child out of wedlock, because both of those women are likely to be subjected to shame in our society, regardless of their choice. It's like, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't. One way or the other, there's going to be shame involved there. And so I would just like to give you this message now, after being a pastor full-time for 15 years, a church rat as a teenager. I've been in this a long time, and I've heard people's stories. I've heard people's confessions, not as a priest, but as a pastor, people tell you things, and let me just assure you of something. If you're a woman who's had an abortion, or if you have had a baby out of wedlock, and I don't know who's watching this who will hear it later, and whatever your situation is right now, let me assure you of something. No human being alive has any right to shame you. Let me assure you. Because if we played a video of all of the actions committed by every human being would be embarrassed for the rest of the world to see their actions, and in fact, they would probably run away screaming and try to get to a remote island as quickly as they possibly could. I can assure you of that. If you feel crushing shame heaped upon you by other human beings, they are not qualified to heap that shame upon you. I can promise you that. And so, shame is not helpful in either choice. All right. Which brings me to why we started One Church almost 5 years ago. This is my last full sermon here. I'll make some remarks next week when I introduce Paula. And so it's appropriate to talk about why this church exists. If you have a conversation with the average American and you say, Christian, go, they are going to say things like, man, churches seem to be so judgmental, heap shame upon people. Some would believe that churches promote bigotry now, largely. They would say they're behind on social issues. They cause harm to people. That's a conversation you're going to hear from a large percentage of Americans. And what they are thinking of, their perception of Christianity, is probably what has been termed the religious right. And this is a kind of an amalgamation of religion and politics that's been powerful in the United States over the last 40 years. and largely in reaction to Roe v. Wade, partly at least. And so, regardless of where you stand on this particular issue, because not all issues are the same, and you may be progressive in some and not in others, but we started this church essentially as an alternative to that perception of Christianity in the United States. That there's this perception of judgmentalism and moral police of society and even oppression, and we wanted to prove that in the Southeast Valley of Phoenix, in what is a Bible Belt in many ways, somebody told me you go southeast to Tempe and you're in Texas, right? It kind of feels that way sometimes. And not that that's bad, right, to the Texas viewers watching right now, right? And so that a church like that could be started here and could do well and be self-sustaining. And it has become that. And that's been 5 years in the making, and it's been tough at times. There have been sacrifices along the way. But it's happened. And so there are lots of people around the country who really see the need in their city for this same kind of community. And so as we welcome Paula next week and we talk about starting new churches in the Open Network, that's why. In most cities in the United States, there isn't a one church. There isn't a non-denominational, independent, forward-thinking, open-minded church like this. There's a drought of those churches in much of the country. I hope you believe I was fair today. I hope so. But aside from this issue, it's hard to find a church that believes that questions and doubts are welcome, or that a difference of opinion can be valued, right? So our values here, our three values: one church is a safe place to express your questions and doubts. It means you can say stuff here and not get kicked out just for expressing an opinion. It's actually an American value. It's freedom of speech. And so we agree with that here. And we say if you don't let people express their questions and doubts, a lot of people are just pretending anyway. So why make them pretend? Why make people fake it to make it, right? That goes into number 2, no perfect people allowed. We're not in the shame business here. Doesn't mean you don't have beliefs or values or that everything's good, or no, it doesn't mean that. It just means that there's a difference between believing something and then now making somebody a social outcast because of your belief. You see the difference there? So we're not a shaming church. No perfect people allowed. If you are perfect, time to go, you know? And then number 3, following Jesus is as much about this world as the next. And that's our stance, that we believe in social justice. And we want to be engaged here on planet Earth. There's a certain brand of Christianity where it's all about going someplace else some other time. So you come to Jesus now so you can go to heaven when you die. And everything's about going someplace else some other time. But Jesus said, like we prayed in the Lord's Prayer, your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so there are folks, who want to go up to heaven. It's like they're passing God on the way up, and God's coming down. They're like, where are you going? Well, I'm coming down to earth. I want to bring heaven to earth. Like, we wanted to get out of here. Well, we believe that following Jesus is as much about this world as the next. And so I want to close with an email that somebody sent to me a few weeks ago. And this person sent an email about why they started attending one church. And I just thought it was a touching email, and it describes the story of many of us here. All of us have our own stories and reasons why we've connected with this community that is going to thrive like crazy in the future, by the way. The future is very bright here. But I just want to close with her email. I've attended one church since last fall. It was sporadic at first. I was at a few services and found the sermons quite different and very interesting compared to churches I'd been to in the past. It was a little startling and really stirred some emotions in me. Actually, the last time I'd gone to church prior to that was a large East Valley church on Easter Sunday a few years ago. About halfway through the sermon, I was frustrated, even a little angry. I wanted to walk out right then, but I listened and waited for the end. The music started and I left. I didn't want to go back again. It was the same Jesus take the wheel type of message I'd heard so many times. And so then all the hard stuff in life is supposed to be okay? I stopped going to church for a long time, but I felt like a spiritual person, and I missed Sunday service. I'd done a lot of soul searching and some self-help type study during those years, and she cites a few of those, and some in other faiths too. And then she writes, but I also wanted to continue in the Christian faith. I started searching for information about modern religion, Christianity, church, etc., and found a podcast. It's more along the lines of a one church flavor. And then I really wanted to find a small local church that I could attend and be inspired by it in a similar way. I also needed to know that all people would be welcome and could have the same opportunity. I believe that one church offers this to the Chandler community and beyond, because many of you drove way farther than from Chandler. But thanks to you and Hannah and the organization that you've established here, I'm so glad to have found one church and that this church is here for everyone. And then she finishes like this. Last Christmas Eve, I almost went to the big church down the road. I figured I could duck in with the huge numbers in attendance, hear some Christmas hymns and the sermon, and duck out. But I didn't. I went to one church that evening, and I have attended every Sunday since then. She says, okay, 3 times we're online attendance. So super honest person. And then I was out of town for 2 Sundays and didn't feel like peopling one Sunday. So she's like giving reason. Oh, good. No shame, right? It's okay. And she said, as for Easter Sunday this year, it was the most meaningful Easter I've ever experienced as a Christian. And, I've gotten a lot of emails like that and heard lots of your stories face to face, and so has Pastor Aaron. And that's why we started a church like this, where we can talk about issues in a way that everybody's opinion is valued, hopefully, and that questions and doubts are welcome, and in fact, everybody is welcome.